You are hungry, and everyone can see it. The fire is low. A child is crying behind you. Then one person stands up and says where the group should go next. For most of human history, leadership did not begin with a crown. It began with a problem. A storm was coming, a child was sick, a trail had gone cold, and someone knew just enough to help everyone move before it was too late. But here is the strange part. The person who led today might not lead tomorrow. Your ancestors did not usually choose leaders the way a modern country chooses presidents or the way a company chooses bosses. There was no office, there was no throne, there was no permanent chair at the front of the room, because for most hunter-gatherer life, there was no room at all. There was a camp, a fire, a few shelters, tools lying in the dirt, and people watching each other very closely. Who could be trusted? Who listened before speaking? Who knew the land? Who stayed calm when fear spread through the group? That was where leadership lived. To understand this, you have to drop a very modern idea. A leader was not the person with the most power. They were just the person everyone else allowed to guide them. For a little while, that changes everything. Small foraging groups could not survive a bully. If a guy grabbed too much meat, or ignored advice, or bragged too loudly, the group had weapons much older than laws. They laughed at him. They ignored him. They walked away. And if he got dangerous, they united against him. Scientists call this a reverse dominance hierarchy. It sounds like academic jargon, but it means something incredibly simple. Instead of one guy pushing everyone down, the group pushes dominance itself down. People weren't equal because they didn't care about status. They were equal because everyone was watching, waiting to catch anyone trying to take too much. So, an ancient leader walked a razor-thin line. Be useful, not arrogant. Be brave, not reckless. Speak up, but never command. Could someone actually lead like that? Absolutely, because leadership was situational. It shifted. During a hunt, the best tracker took the lead. During a fight, the calmest voice won. During a birth, the older woman with experience ran the camp. Power shifted because survival shifted. This is why ancient leadership wasn't a pyramid. It was a campfire. People gathered around whoever had the right knowledge at the right second. When the moment passed, the circle shifted again. For decades, anthropologists living with hunter-gatherers noticed the exact same thing. From the Kalahari Desert to the jungles of Paraguay, they watched how successful hunters were treated after a big kill. You'd expect a parade, right? Applause, praise. Instead, they found a strange custom. It's often called insulting the meat. A hunter brings back a massive animal, and the group jokes that it's skinny, worthless, barely edible. It wasn't cruelty, it was balance. Nobody wanted the hunter to think one lucky day made him a king. Think about how backward that feels today. Now success means a spotlight, a promotion, a public ranking, a title. But back then, too much spotlight was dangerous. Arrogance could split the camp. It could turn one person's skill into everyone else's problem. So ego was cooled. The meat belonged to the group. Now, this doesn't mean your ancestors were peaceful saints. They were human. They gossiped. They argued. They held grudges. But cooperation wasn't just a nice idea. It was food. It was defense. It was surviving the night. If you wanted influence, you had to protect those relationships. A hunter who fed others became essential. A hunter who only fed his pride became a threat. So, how did they choose? Not with ballots, not with speeches, not with lawn signs. They chose by listening. They chose by following. They remembered who was right the last time. They noticed who gave more than they took. And sometimes, they chose by flat out refusing to follow. Picture a morning 40,000 years ago. The sky is orange, the ground is freezing. Your group hasn't eaten since yesterday. The kids are quiet, that dangerous kind of quiet when hunger goes too far. A few adults crouch near the cold ashes of last night's fire. Someone finds tracks at the edge of camp. Hoof marks, broken grass, a line of dung still warm enough to matter. One guy wants to chase immediately. He's strong. Broad shoulders, covered in scars. He talks loud. He says the animal is close. But an older woman shakes her head. She remembers this valley. She knows the herd circles toward a muddy crossing after it rains. Another hunter kneels down, touches the dirt, and says the prints aren't as fresh as they look. A younger person points to vultures circling way off in the distance. No one raises a hand to vote. No one crowns a chief. Instead, the group watches the evidence bounce around the circle. Strength speaks, memory speaks, tracking speaks. The sky and the birds speak. Then people just start moving in the direction that makes the most sense. For the next few hours, the tracker takes the lead. Not because he owns the group, because for this specific problem, his brain is the sharpest tool. He slows everyone down with a raised hand. He changes direction when the wind shifts. He tells the younger hunters to stay back. People obey, because right then, obedience isn't about humiliation. It is pure survival. But when the hunt ends, his authority fades right back into the circle. Later that night, beside the fire, a totally different leader steps up. Not the fastest runner, not the strongest spear thrower. An older storyteller starts to speak. Her hair is gray. Her voice is low. Kids lean into their mothers. Even the loud, scarred hunter listens. Why? Because she remembers births, deaths, old camps, poisonous roots, and exactly where people made fatal mistakes. She is the group's hard drive. She carries their social memory. When she talks about an old blood feud, it's not just a campfire story. She's teaching the group how not to destroy itself. Biologists who study evolutionary cooperation point out an incredible detail here. Human babies are helpless for a very long time. They need way more care than one exhausted mother can give alone. That means grandmothers, fathers, siblings, and trusted campmates were literally the difference between life and death. In a world like that, leadership came from care just as much as it came from force. Keeping a child alive made you just as essential as bringing down prey. This is probably our biggest modern misunderstanding about ancient leaders. We love to picture a jacked alpha male standing on a rock, pointing a spear while everyone bows down. It's a simple image. It's dramatic. It's also completely wrong. Humans are not just gorillas with better tools. We survived through argument, reputation, sharing, and the collective ability to punish bullies. A leader who couldn't keep trust was standing on extremely thin ice. Even the word alpha messes us up. In some animal packs, dominance is just physical control. But in small human bands, influence was about persuasion. And persuasion means getting people to move because they actually believe you're right. Not because your fist is bigger. You could be terrifying and still have nobody follow you. You could be totally quiet and be the center of the camp. Here is the craziest twist. Ancient people might have chosen their leaders by choosing who wasn't allowed to lead. A bully got blocked. A bragger got mocked. A selfish hoarder lost all respect. A violent guy woke up one day and realized everyone else had been making plans while he wasn't listening. Leadership wasn't just about rising to the top. It was about the group preventing you from rising too far. This system worked perfectly for hundreds of thousands of years. Your ancestors lived in small, mobile groups. Possessions were limited. If things got bad, you could literally just walk away. Everyone needed everyone else. But eventually, the rules changed. We discovered farming. Farming meant food could be stored, land could be claimed, villages got bigger, and suddenly they were a lot harder to leave. For the first time, we had surplus, extra food. And once you can control extra food, you can control a lot more than just advice. You can control granaries, fields, debts, walls, and eventually, armies. Leadership began to harden. We can actually see this transition happening at places like Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. It's an 11,000-year-old site with massive carved stone pillars. It sits right on the edge between the old hunter-gatherer world and the early farming world. Archaeologists realized something amazing here. Humans were pulling off enormous, coordinated projects long before kings or empires even existed, because coordination isn't the same as domination. You can organize without a palace. You can gather for a massive ritual without a throne. But as groups grew, the ancient circle started to break. A camp of 30 people can watch a selfish guy very closely. A village of 3,000? They cannot watch everyone the same way. A small band can easily mock a bragger around the fire. A massive town needs rules, guards, storage systems. And it needs people who claim the absolute right to enforce decisions. The campfire didn't disappear overnight, but the space for permanent authority was growing. And this brings the story right back to you. Your brain still watches leaders in the exact same old way. It still asks if someone's confidence is just hiding selfishness. It still notices who shares the credit. It still distrusts a person who demands respect without offering safety. It still relaxes around the person who stays completely calm during chaos. This isn't just your modern personality talking. It is ancient social equipment. You might live in a world of managers, governments, algorithms, and institutions your ancestors couldn't even imagine. But your body still runs the campfire test. Does this person help the group think? Do they listen when others know more? Do they stay steady when panic spreads? Do they take way more than they give? And the ultimate question? Would you follow them if there were no official title forcing you to? That last question cuts deep. Because for most of human history, a leader wasn't a name printed on a sign. A leader was simply the person people turned toward when the dark became uncertain. Not forever, not automatically, only as long as the trust held. You are hungry, and everyone can see it. The fire is low. A child is crying behind you. And now you understand, the person who finally stands up must be a whole lot more than just loud.